East Khasi Hills is relatively one of the most developed districts in Meghalaya. It is a model district in terms of economic and social infrastructure. The towns, market centers, and villages are well connected throughout the district. The network of good roads in East Khasi Hills are a major boost to the all-round development in the state. Today, we are on a journey to some of the remotest rural communities in the Khasi Hills, where the only way to get to these villages is to walk on foot for a considerably long distance across steep mountain slopes and deep river valleys. We are traveling via Peninsula towards the easternmost border of Khohber. The itinerary includes driving from Shillong to Peninsula and further southwest through the villages of Lindem, Satwat, Pernai, Rinko and Mawlam, where we then continue the journey on foot to reach our destination. The contiguous villages of Tluh and Khohber in Khohber area is where we are going, and to get there we will have to trek across one of the most extreme landscapes in the Khasi Hills. We start our next leg of the journey on foot, some 11 kilometers from Peninsula, from Mawlam village, which has the nearest motorable road to Tluh and Khohber. Like most villages in the Peninsula region, Mawlam is a horticulture community with a majority of the population involved in cultivation. The houses are built close to one another, reflecting a close-knit society which is typical of small rural communities. The architecture and social structures have a long-standing relationship and interrelatedness that mirrors the societal norms and societal values of the community. We caught up with some traditional belief system, an age-old healing practice that continues to influence the lives of the adherents of the indigenous religion, even with the advent of modern allopathic medicine. The Nongkhan, or traditional healers' treatment of ailments, include the cracking of raw eggs on a wooden object known as Dingshat Dingkhan. As he reads the cracked pieces of the egg for a sign, he also prays to God to heal the sick. It's a practice that has stood the test of time, and members of the indigenous faith believe that it is effective and that it heals the sick. The fees for this form of traditional healing are not charged by the Nongkhan. The payment is made voluntarily according to the capacity of the sick person. Apparently, more important in this traditional indigenous society is the social capital that is generated in the network of social relations. We move on to the starting point of our trek, which was an old megalithic trail used by the farmers. We had to walk past fields of broomgrass and forest land all the way down to the river below. It's a long trek that will take us through an amazing landscape to reach our first village, Tluh. We are at the starting point here in Mawlam, on our way on a trek through 3 mountains, 2 rivers. We're going to go downhill, uphill, and reach our end point. It was a bright sunny morning, just right for a long trek. We hurried past the broomgrass country, walking at a fast pace downhill towards the river Wakinyeng, which would probably take us approximately 45 minutes or a little less. The guides suggested that we might have to walk a minimum of 6 to 7 hours from start to finish, provided there were no distractions along the way. The trail from Mawlam to Wakinyang was used regularly by the farmer cultivators on the way to the fields. The villagers from Tluh and Khohber used this path often to carry and drop their crops at Mawlam station, as well as to catch public transportation on their onward journey to Peninsula and Shillong. On the way, we stopped by a huge rock overlooking the valley and the Khatashnong mountains to the west, known to the locals as Mount Rinsan, or literally the rock platform. The trail gets steeper and steeper as we progress further downhill, putting a lot of pressure on the knees and ankles. During the rainy season, the stepping stones would have been very slippery and difficult to walk on.
To give you a better perspective of where we exactly are, this is Pernai village, that is Lindem village. Down below you have Warba village, then we have Sdair, and we have Khohber up there. Behind Khohber, at a distance, you can see Krang village. And our journey today is Tluh. We're going to Tluh first, then we'll go to Khohber.
The demand for bay leaf or tezpata as an aromatic ingredient in cooking all over the country has seen large shipments of this leaf being transported from the Mawlam area almost all year round. This crop has sustained the economy of the villages in the Rewar area.
So the economy of a village like Mawlam is in these bay leaves which they've just harvested and taken them from the branches, and these are going to be packed in sacks, and this will take the whole day, and by tomorrow morning they're going to come back here and take them back to the village to be transported to the markets.
Mawlam was still the nearest motorable road for Tluh and Khohber village. Likewise, the villagers of Sdair and Warba and Khatashnong have been crossing the river Wakinyang or Wamuru as it is known upstream to load and upload their goods at Lindem village on the Peninsula side because of its proximity. We continue on a journey with not much difficulty as we were well equipped in the sense that our walking shoes and whole attire was meant for such long treks. The rural folk though, unlike us, are used to this hard walk, comfortably walking in their slippers or barefoot and normally carrying loads of 40 to 50 kgs on their backs at times. This was the way they lived their lives for many generations in an area where motorable roads and public amenities were luxury. We were past the halfway mark and the village of Tluh on the opposite ridge across the river was slightly visible, a small hamlet amidst a lush green surrounding. As we descended the track, it became steeper. We passed a bamboo grove and a little further down came across an old ficus tree whose roots were consolidated into the trail, making it more secure and walkable across the steep terrain.
So we've come to this very interesting ficus tree, and this is what you call the ficus culture of the Khasi people, where you see it's not only about bridges and ladders, but a footpath which has been carved out from this hillside with the roots of the ficus tree. And this footpath, these series of steps from the ficus tree would have made it easier for the people to move up and down this rugged terrain. Without these bioengineering ficus roots, it would have been very difficult to climb up this cliff face.
The landscape is a difficult looking one, but the communities living here have adapted very well, living off the land, passing on the knowledge and wisdom from one generation to another. It is a very practical approach to life which has ensured the survival of the communities in this extreme terrain. The horticulturists' forefathers have worked the land for years, making it fruitful and sustainable. Besides, broomgrass, bay leaf, betel nut, and betel leaf grows well in this land. The trunk of the betel nut tree, after cutting and shaping it, has a number of uses as planks on the floor of the house. The variety of hardwood trees in the forest have been a vital source of building material for the community here. These men are camping here for 10 days to complete the task of splitting and shaping the timber into logs. Making a living in an ecosystem such as this has taught them a number of skills.
Thì one chừng này thì one lệ yêu chừng này mà.
Ông lên ở đỉnh.
Ở điên. Thì cái điên yêu, đúng không?
Cả cái gì? Con cừu.
Thì cái điên mình lệ yêu mình ta mình sna ying này mình sna yêu.
Sna ying khlau.
Ying khlau. Thì phi lệ nó phi pom yêu điên. Này phi là được pom lu pau điên.
Là được pom.
Phi long phi pin jeli pin.
Ada kurat.
Ada kurat. Thì kan nó ski. Phi lệ này.
Try nga spill sni sih.
Sa be spill sni.
Sa spill.
Kabam cái flower rak lupa.
Được kret lupa.
Rak kret lupa. Arar ngut isa spill sni. Thì man ko por phi lệ ngene ka kam.
Por ba keloj por ba pan bela ki driu te.
Pan bela.
Set lek.
Kakit pan ya ka ding.
Kakit tipi ki try.
Giing khlau phi mut giing khlau ki badan habri ne no.
Ki badan habri.
Habri mo. Hang ne ke di bri yu ne.
Kene kabri na tenis nang na Mawlam.
Ya bonu kwai.
Bun kwai ki yarep lenai.
Wei
Senyam.
Senyam. Yang wei lenai.
Lenai.
Lenai yu senyam. La terpan.
Na tepat.
Tempo.
Tempur don di yarep.
Our guide Lucas was keen to show us some of his expert tree climbing skills. Not only does one need to be fit, but flexibility and strength are prerequisites to climb the slender trunk of a betel nut tree. Of course, it goes without saying that a lean body and short stature is an added advantage to survive in this kind of environment. Apparently, it may seem that the terrain and the nature of work has in a way been responsible for evolving and shaping the physical structure of the people living in this area.
On our way we found this log of tree, and this belongs to the jackfruit tree. This is solid wood, and it has many uses for the people in these villages. For one, this is used in the structure of their houses. This serves as a pillar which can give support to the house for more than 100 years. This is solid wood. And jackfruit tree, incidentally, is also used for furniture. This is very good wood, and it's something which grows abundantly in these areas. So what you see here is a insect of probably the grasshopper family, and these are found only during the dry season. When the rains come, these insects disappear. This is a favorite snack of the people here in Kharashnong, and what they do is they just put it in the fire and roast it and eat it as a snack.
The trail gets steeper as we draw closer to the river below. We pass through some Jhum land on the way. To outsiders, the sight of logging and burned vegetation may seem to be destructive to the environment, but over here, this form of cultivation has been tried and tested, proving to be a sustainable and organic practice which has provided food security to the villagers and has preserved the indigenous forests for generations. We finally make it to the bridge across the river Wa Kinyeng after more than an hour walking downhill. It is probably around 25% of the journey that we have completed, and it will take us a good 5 hours and 10 to 20,000 steps to reach our extraction point in Nongba Maushut.
So we are crossing this river called Wa Kinyeng. In this portion or Kintoj, it's called Wa Kinyeng, but this is the Muru River that acts as a border between Khanar and Mawlam. This is a beautiful landscape, and you can see that this bridge, which is 70 meters long, has served these people here. People from Tluh village use this passage across the river going to Mawlam village.
I just hope that we've got enough daylight by the time we start climbing the last mountain to Pudang village, which is the last major climb and the last leg of the journey. Most of the time, at the ground level, we may not see the real shape and size of the landscape. Apparently, a bird's eye view reveals the true picture of the terrain that we have walked, and though it may look formidable and untamed from above, it is only when you walk the trails that you realize the difference. Tluh village sits on a mountain ridge which slopes to the south. The land on both sides, east and west, drops steeply to form a deep gorge. We soon walked into a garden of arecanut trees and several stone piles for growing wild pepper. The path is an old one, a zigzag trail laid out with uneven and irregular stones all along the way. After some half an hour of walking, we entered Tluh village. The path was cemented and smooth, shaded by fruit trees on both sides. Standing on wooden stilts, the houses are basic in construction, made from bamboo, wood, and corrugated tin sheets. The slope of the land on which the village of some 37 households sits appears to be a series of terraces with a single footpath running down the middle. Tluh is a hamlet and one of the remotest of the remote communities in the Khasi Hills. There were not too many residents around as we explored the village.
We've reached Tluh village after about 25 minutes of climbing up the slope from the river down below, and as you can see, this village is a green village. All around it's surrounded by greenery and trees, and people make their livelihood out of cultivation. What you have here is these sacks of bay leaf. This is the pepper which they have put it out to dry, and this is the yam, and they've kept this to generate and get the spuds. What they do is they carve it out and they plant it in the fields. So this is basically not for eating but for planting.
There were few signs of development. The community lacked the infrastructure and amenities found in other villages. There were no school for the children, nor any electricity. Solar lamps were used for indoor and outdoor lighting. Water was available as long as the surrounding forests were maintained and preserved. Besides the Enrega footpaths and toilets, the ropeway for transporting crops were the only signs of government-sponsored intervention in the village. Relatively untouched by external social elements, the society was a close-knit one where the households depended much on collective responsibility and age-old traditional survival strategies. The majority practiced the indigenous religion and traditional healing methods. It was a relatively vulnerable, small population surviving on the fringes of civilization. The community in Tluh has carved out an existence from their surroundings and depended greatly on the availability of natural resources and cultivation for survival. However, there were threats that could disrupt the balance of life in Tluh. One was the serious lack of healthcare facilities, which meant that any disease may cause fatalities and grave consequences. We moved on from Tluh to a nearby village called Khohber. It's a narrow trail that we followed on the side of the mountain. We had completed around 40% of our trekking, and it was still a long way to go after visiting our next destination, Khohber village. Passing through the lush green trail, we immersed ourselves in the natural surroundings of strangler fig trees and ingenious beehives built in the hollow of a tree trunk. It's amazing each and every time we see the native ingenuity employed at the most unlikely of places. If there was one thing that stands out in today's trek on the trail from Tluh to Khohber, it is the experience of walking in one of the toughest extreme terrain in the Khasi Hills. Although narrow, the trail is a very well surveyed and constructed passage. The architect of this trail had thoughtfully carved out the path on the side of the mountain, horizontally all along the way, much different from other trails which ran vertically from the bottom to the top of the mountain. This made it much easier and less tiring for people to walk from one village to the other. Khohber sits on a ridge, a landscape similar to Tluh, surrounded by greenery, mostly landscaped and gardened by the community. It is probably the smallest village in Khatashnong with only 11 households.
So the trek was a very nice one. It's not totally uphill, but a lot of places where the gradient is very gentle. So this makes it one of the best trails here in Khatashnong. And from Tluh, we've reached our final destination, Khohber. This is the last village today, and we will see what Khohber has in store for us.
The traditional way of life is sustained because of its remoteness and isolation. The huts of wood and tin sheets are few and close together, standing under the shade of the jackfruit and bay leaf trees. Unlike Tluh, Khohber has a SSA government-sponsored lower primary school. The presence of this institution of learning in such a remote location as Khohber raises hope for a community in terms of its role as an agent of societal change. It's a small step towards providing basic education and improving the literacy level in this faraway distant community. The traditional way of life continues in Khohber. The remote location, the lack of access to medical facilities, and a belief system rooted in the cultural past have institutionalized the traditional practice of healing. The village healer plays an important role in the society, providing relief to the individuals who suffer from an ailment. How effective is the healing was something which we did not experience yet in our visit to Khohber. Khohber is a horticulture-based economy with plenty of fruits and crops cultivated in and around the village. There are a sizable number of young boys and girls, indicating a demography that favors the continuation of the horticultural practice. The younger generation will in most probability continue in their parents' footsteps in the land of their forefathers. We meanwhile leave Khohber to continue in our last leg of the journey to Nongba Moshut, a long walk of more than 2 hours. We descend once again to the river valley below, and after crossing the river, it will be another long steep climb to our final destination. The path is hardly discernible. At some places it passes through some jhum land and some rough terrain. Further down the path vanishes and we have to cross a steep rock face. It's a thread of a trail just wide enough for our feet to walk the edge. Without guides, it would have been impossible to find a way in this rugged extreme terrain. While trekking in unknown, unfamiliar ground, one has to depend entirely on the knowledge and wisdom of the local guides. Otherwise, one can use a map or follow certain landmarks like rivers and streams, which we were doing at the moment. Another huge factor is the presence of daylight. Trekking at night in unfamiliar territory is not only difficult but dangerous, and one should avoid doing it without guides. We were close to the river and had a fair idea of where the trail was leading to. On the opposite mountain slope, we could roughly make out the ridge on which a trail would be passing through.
This will be the last bridge that we will have to cross. Below me is the river Wat Trao, about 50 meters in length. And from here, it's an uphill climb all the way to Padang village. And from Padang village to our station, where somebody will be waiting for us.
The river, with its exposed rocks and having much less water during this time of the year, offered a good location to rest for a brief time and eat a packed lunch. It's a healthy, pristine environment, and the crystal clean river provided a safe haven for diverse aquatic life. Fishlings and tadpoles aplenty were swimming in its cool waters. On the side of the river, a huge ficus tree displayed a sign prohibiting any fishing by nets or damming the water, using of chemicals or other practices that destroyed the aquatic life. Only the conventional fishing with angling rods was allowed. We had covered a substantial distance in the shortest possible time and were on track to reach at least the top of this mountain while some daylight was still available. It's tiring, this uphill climb, after walking for more than 5 hours across rugged terrain. Our visit to the remotest of the remote villages, Tluh and Khohber, today were an experience to cherish, especially after having trekked for more than 6 hours. There are many more journeys to more unknown and unfamiliar villages. At the moment, we are happy to have finally made it in one piece, just as the night was setting in.
It's been a long and tough day's work, and what a tiring walk from Mawlam to Tluh to Khohber, and we've reached Padang. Until we meet again, from me and the team behind this show, it's Khohber.
Done more.